The whole campaign began when our first ancestor was kidnapped. And since that first ancestor was kidnapped, we've engaged in a range of different activities in liberating ourselves. Um, and so this is the image of one of the statues that was removed as a consequence of a campaign, the Rosenham School campaign. And this is the statue of Robert Milligan that was removed on the 9th of June in London, outside the London Museum. And there's a whole list of organizations or statues that have been toppled in the line of this campaign. So our two questions that we're tackling today is, who paid for the statues of the racist enslavers around London? And did they know their crimes? Those are the two questions that are going through our panel. And I'll give you 15 minutes to give your outline on whether who these people were, or in answering these questions. In fact, let me start by who paid for the statues of the racist enslavers around London. If I could start with, if that's okay, with Mr. Maury. Okay, so I'm happy with it. Let's go in the format that's most comfortable, because that's the best way to liberate the genius in the soul. So, Elder Martha, and if you want you to answer the two as one, that's fine.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I haven't got no answer to those two questions yet. Maybe at some stage I will have an answer. But I just want to use the space given to make a statement of our experience in Tottenham of bringing down an offensive image in the early and late 70s and 80s. But before I do that, we all know what our position is. And our position is always been do no harm. And that harm might be physical, it might be mental, it might be psychological. Whatever form it takes that does harm is anyway. In this case, the harm is done to 12 years with 4 children. And we were living in a council estate. And it was quite obvious that we don't like each other. The master made sure that we didn't like each other. The ones from small island and the ones from big island, the ones from mainland Africa, were all black. They don't like us. But then we have reason not to like each other. So living on this particular estate, the Campsborn estate, the mission was actually that we have to bridge this gap to deal with this thing that is happening to us. So we formed a United Black Women. Sign this for what we're gonna do. We can't climb up to bring it down. And if we go around it and picket, they're gonna block us up. But we continue talking about it. And then suddenly the local newspaper, the Hunzi Journal, had the period of going to different pubs to tell us how good the pubs are, what they sell, and so on and so forth. And there was this article about promoting it. So that gave us an opportunity, and we wrote to Hunzi Journal and we said to Hunzi Journal, look, we noticed that you praised this pub. You didn't say anything about this offensive sign that is outside black boys. That every black person is offended by. So they responded. Well, I don't know. The reaction was at that stage, it wasn't too bad because there was still they went. It wasn't as bad as when I first came. So the reaction was that we have to do something. So we went to the club and we spoke to them, and the manager said he's not the owner, and so on and so forth. And we created that. We will train ourselves around this thing if you don't take it down. So they took it down. In that process, we realized that actually the system has a well-organized way of doing things. So actually, who gives permission for somebody to put an offensive sign? Who names the roads? So we begin to learn how those things work so that we don't burn ourselves out by just some of us can be angry outside, some will be inside. People will believe the system will be inside and how you can think back where they should be. So that was one of the things that we did. And as I said to you, that was in the early 80s. I'm looking for the dates. Somebody is checking because what we decided now is to put whatever we have in the Bush Castle Museum, which is our local museum, so that people can have access to it. So when we came to the stage of the roads, Black Boy Lane, we couldn't in those days. We didn't have the power, we didn't have the support to talk about changing the road. But as I speak to you now, the consultation of changing that name is almost finished. So hopefully very soon, Black Boy Lane will become La Rose Lane. John LaRose, as you all know, was our local hero. He was the owner and runs the bookshop, the New Beacon bookshop in South Greenwood. His past now, bless him. So when that was an example of how long it takes within the system to do certain things. But things have changed. We've now reached the stage where actually things are moving so fast that the issues are so obvious that we can't afford to lose this period. So we have to make sure that all those things are part of our reparation, because you have to repair, you have to fix it, you have to make sure that those who stole pay back, that those who do harm move their knees off our necks and allow us to move forward. And because we just too normal, we're not able to do as much harm. And that's why they're so afraid, because they always think that we're going to be like that. But we're not going to be able to do those things. So when we say fairness, we say justice, and we say human, when we say world or globe, we mean for all. We're not saying it's only for us. Therefore, I'm going to stop here, because I thought, I show you, I give you example, because there's all many other signs of different things that is happening. So now in Haringey and in many other boroughs, people are not allowing those things to happen. They now know that actually they are the ones, the council are the ones who have the power to name those places. They have the power to give permission for things to go up. But what they don't have power to do is to do things that's going to do harm to anybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Elder Master. Thank you. Though you said you will not be answering the question, I think you've done a lot more than answer the question for us, insofar as who paid for the statue. And essentially what I heard from you is that the statues have been paid for in the harm and pain that we've experienced. And out of that pain and harm, we've been able to discover new ways of moving forward. A part of that discovery came in mobilizing around removing the offensive sign on the pub, which led to a greater investigation into who's responsible. So that sense of do no harm and taking a position of self-determination seems to have shown that we did pay, or we are paying for these symbols, but there's something we can do about it. And there's a long tradition. So before, I'd like to welcome Brother Toyin. I think I saw Brother Toyin in the house, and we'll possibly be asking him to speak a little bit later on, if he will. And before we move on to that, our Sister Maureen, with your approach to answering this question around who's responsible for these statues, who pays for these statues, and did they know about their crimes?
Thank you very much, and indeed it is an honor for me to join the platform. I know Glenroy has been trying to get me on, and every time we just couldn't get it right, but thank you very much, and thanks for having me. I'm Maureen Hinda from Namibia, considered myself a Pan-Africanist. And to look at the question that is on the table, from the Namibian perspective, I thought there are so many statutes, so I was wondering which one to look at, because the Statute of Colonialism and apartheid in Namibia is inherent in the architecture, because
because the statute
So
of
when you enter a
colonialism
town, you simply, so the buildings are statutes as well.
in apartheid
But
in
there
Namibia
is
is
this specific statute of the,
inherent in the
what
architecture.
was it called, the
The
rider
statute
on the
of
horse.
when you enter a town,
That
simply
was,
so the buildings
it
are
came to Namibia, I think, around 1911. It was brought to demonstrate some victory of the Germans. It was privately funded, if I look at it in monetary terms. It was said to have been privately funded from Germany. Of course, after independence, it has been removed. There was a public outcry, but we had two views. So there was this view because it was at a very strategic place. General view is that it is reminding us of the bad days of apartheid. It must go down, and it was removed, first relocated, and after some people still complained about it, it is then in the museum, in the backyard of a museum, stacked. But thinking about it today, also maybe before I get to that, it is important to look at it from the genocide perspective, because you would see that the early war of resistance was against the invasion of the Germans mainly, and fight over land, which led to the genocide, which my sister mentioned that it was in fact the first genocide in the world against the Herero and the Nama people. And I am a descendant of a direct descendant of the victims of the genocide. So because the history has the genocide, it has colonialism, it is apartheid, it is so much multifaceted. And because the genocide was directed on specific groups, it touches to the history of specific tribal groups. As a result, views differ around this. And I think of the statutes mainly in Namibia, our ancestors paid with their blood in it, because it was a victory they claimed. So meaning that they claimed victory of the genocide, that they have killed of some tribes 50%, and in some cases up to 80% of certain groups. Very brutal. Now the views around these studies, as I said, from the affected communities, I think on the side of the directly affected communities or the descendants thereof, there is lately a view that taking off or removing of the statutes destroys that part of the history. Because our history, unfortunately, mainly focus on the recent history. And you see that the genocide happened at the turn of the 20th century, around 1904. And as a result, there's not much emphasis on that part of history. It's not really taught in school. And although government has also taken up the responsibility to demand reparations, restoration and restitution from the German government, still it it is felt that most focus is on the liberation struggle history. At times, self-critique, we tell ourselves that maybe we are the ones that has to tell the story. But be as it may, the statutes represent, tells the story of the genocide. And we could only concede to removal of those statutes if they are replaced with statutes that reflects the atrocities that happen. So the way we wish to look at it is that the story must still be told so that the generations to come should have a reference point. And if the rider on the horse is a sign of Van Trotta claiming that his mission was successful, if it is replaced, it should be, if it is to be removed, it should be replaced with the heroes chased into a desert, pushed into a kraal, burned alive with their cattle, drove into a desert. You know, people that have lost their life in the concentration camps, children and women not spared. That is our view. That is our view, and I hope it makes sense, because we are trying to say is that because we at the end also, because of the genocide, became a minority group, we don't want to vanish in history to come. So our generations to come should be able to identify, should be able to know that their ancestors, blood waters, our freedom as well. I hope without making it more a grouping issue, I am trying to emphasize that there is still we still have an obligation to ensure that the history of the struggle does not get lost in the process. And we have then to find a way of putting up studies that reflects the true history that we want to tell. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Elder Moore. Thank you. You really have given us a very clear indication of who paid for these statues, because essentially what I hear you saying is that the Herero people has paid, and the evidence of the crime that the Herero people have paid for is in the symbols of these statues, and there needs to be a reclamation of the Herero people's legacy in a vivid way. So we can't just be saying get rid of the statue. There's something more about addressing the harm that's been done. And I recall Elder Master saying, do no harm. So it seems we've got a theme here around who's paying for these statues and the actions that people are taking in terms of addressing it. So I'll move on to Brother Kwame. You've got quite a platform to follow on from, brother.
I'm wondering if Toyin had unmute to speak, or did he want to wait till later? I'm not sure.
Sounds like he did. Oh, yes, Brother Toyin.
Greetings. I mean, it depends. If Brother Kwame is okay to speak, because I don't think I can stay for the whole session, but I'm happy to give way if not. So, I mean, we can ask Brother Kwame first, and if he's okay, then I'll more than happily say a few words. Is Brother Kwame?
I am happy for doing this.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Greetings, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. Apologies, I came a little late, and it's wonderful listening to the contributions so far. I'm learning much from this. I kind of did indicate to Glenroy that I wouldn't be speaking much on the topic of statutes right now, even though that's what the debate is. But I am very, very interested in the topic. But I just need a little space with the turbulent few weeks I've had addressing this very, very, very important issue. But what I would like to contribute to the debate, if you would allow me, is the things that we can do when we're talking about these kind of symbols in public spaces, about their importance and the role that we as individuals can get involved in changing them. I think the first thing we have to acknowledge is that sometimes when we are asked about these symbols and these names, and I'm talking about the toxic ones, not symbols that revere our role models and our history and our resistance. I'm talking about those toxic ones for colonialists and enslavers. One of the techniques, one of the things that we have to remember is that when we are opposing them, it's very important that we rely on the language of them being dehumanizing as opposed to them being offensive. You see, one of the tricks that the racists often do, but that's what they are, the racist white supremacists, is that they often get us caught in these games. So why do you find it offensive? And the problem with the topic of offensiveness is that everyone has an entitlement to be offended, to like, to offend. These are issues of taste. There's nothing actually wrong with the issue of taste. I don't like Brussels sprouts. I wouldn't say I'm offended by Brussels sprouts, but I don't like Brussels sprouts. I don't like the smell of them. That's not an issue. When we're talking about these symbols, and I use the word symbols as opposed to names, I think the correct language, and it was mentioned earlier by our speaker, is to talk about dehumanizing. Leaving these toxic symbols up on the streets where we live, in the spaces that we congregate, public spaces which we own, dehumanizes us. If we're venerating ideas of white supremacy, if we're venerating ideas of African inferiority, they're continuing to dehumanize us. This is not a personal opinion about something being offensive or not. This is an issue about degradation. This is an issue about dignity. This is an issue about rights, human rights. And so my suggestion is that we sometimes recalibrate the way we think about these issues. It's not unusual to expect white supremacists to put up symbols venerating their history and their toxic murderers to venerate themselves. That's their issue. My issue is what they find tasteful is up to them. But anything that is actually dehumanizing us is a different matter. The second thing I would say, that the contribution I'd like to make on this particular issue, is that right now we're in a very unique time. I think that we have been the currents that have led to us being here right now. I'm talking about the lockdown. I'm talking about the murder of George Floyd. I'm talking about the Black Lives Matter protests. I'm talking about the Statute of Colonialism coming down. These unique events have all lined up one after the other. And they have had the effect of actually enabling us to have this discussion. And for those people who would normally be silent on these matters to get engaged. They're already getting bored, many of them, and they're moving on to the next agenda. They're speaking about Harry 2 days ago. Now they're going to be moving on to something else. And that's the way that the media circle runs. But while there is this opportunity that's been mentioned to make change, and processes have started to change the names of streets, to address some of the dehumanization that's going on in the public realm, one of the things that's very important that we do as a community is that we interact with the local authorities that are leading those processes. And we have a system where we deal with it on almost a weekly basis. You see, because as local authorities, the government is clear about this. They don't want anything to change. They're rednecks, they're racists, that's what they do. They're trying to pass legislation. But the real power on many of these issues lies in the hands of the councillors the mayors in the places where we live. And those of us in those localities have the ability to actually send emails, to send objections, to join consultation panels, to make suggestions, and to keep doing it systematically, week after week. Just one email, just tweak the words every week, send it to someone else, and they send it on. And that generates enough activity to actually push things forward in the correct direction. So I think we sometimes forget that because we're very told, kind of like make a lot of noise, protest about these kind of things. Don't deal with it in a rational manner. Just kind of like shout and scream, and then we can take photos of you and show how angry you are. But yeah, we can do that. But simultaneously, we look at the organising. I think someone put inside, yes, Sister Nzega, seize the time. We do need to do that. And that does mean the boring, laborious task of just sending the odd email, the odd letter, just saying, like was done with the Black Boy Lane Pub, etc. That actually we find these toxic symbols dehumanizing. What are you going to do to address them? And then you can also, just the last thing, just to add on to that, you can also watch council meetings. I wouldn't advise them; they can be very boring on YouTube. They go on and on and on and on. But if you see something that's dealing on YouTube with your local authority, that's dealing with the streets or dealing with public spaces, the councillors are there. They have to minute the comments that come in if they can. Sometimes they're not interactive, but if there's a space to be interactive, to send a petition in, that's what they call them, send it in. Let them read it out. Let them record our objections in their official records and build up the evidence that there's a demand for change, because they are already planning in a way, not all local authorities, but many are looking a way to bury this and to move forward. So hopefully that was useful. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there unless there's any immediate questions.
Thank you, Brother Toyin. So we've now looked at how we define this symbolism and the trickery or the challenge, the propaganda battle in defining these symbols and defining them as dehumanizing. It's been advocated as opposed to the individualizing offensive that could be taken in a much more skewed way. And also the importance of activism, which has continued throughout this discussion around how or who pays, and the payment seems to be something we're paying in being dehumanized, but we have to define the terrain. And defining the terrain is about how we engage with local decision making. So that's why I say we need to be engaging with those local decision making structures, one being our local authorities. So I'm going to move on now to our political officer. That's quite a connector. I can see Glenroy holding his hand up, but I'm not going to let you come in yet. Is it your protocol? Sorry.
Well, no, it's because Toyin said he might want to go. Sorry, Kwame, because I know you're having problems with your internet. I don't want to keep you waiting any longer. But what Maureen has said, Toyin, is something that continues coming up about the issue of history and how we make sure that getting rid of the statue doesn't get rid of the history. So, do we discuss that? Do we say, as I saw in some places, I think in Wales recently, it was a Welsh name and a stroke in English version and so on. Is there some idea of how we bridge both of those gaps to make sure that when we remove the statues, because I'm very much in favor of removing the statue, remove all of it, but they providing some historical context so that they can future generations can learn. Because I understand them. But I just wonder whether, you as somebody who was on the task with them, I know we've talked about this and the horror of it, so I'm not taking you there by any means. But is there a way to bridge this gap? Sorry,
No apologies, and thank you again, Kwame, for giving me the space to answer. I will be happy to talk about this after the elections in May. I just need a little bit of headspace away from the chaotic madness. I don't back down. Fine. Now, on the question that you asked, we have to be careful. The government is promoting what they call a retain and explain strategy. And this is where they're saying, don't take down the statues, but explain their context today in place. And so it means that you can leave a toxic symbol up and say, you know, oh, but they were also involved in slavery, end of. Now, this may seem like to solve the problem, but we clearly know actually something's not right there. We have to make the argument, and it's not a difficult one to make, that we cannot erase history. Unless we have a TARDIS or a time machine, or you have a friend who's a Kryptonian who can fly around the Earth and spin it around and make time go backwards, we cannot erase history. So when toxic symbols come out of the public spaces or public realm, they can go into museums, they can go into council offices, they can get the spaces they can be moved into, and they can be contextualized in a better space for public learning. You see, with Colston, one of the things that the racists don't discuss is that most people actually had no idea who Colston was, apart from the Bristol, until the statue actually came down. It was actually the people removing it that actually brought history, and his history and Britain's history, to national prominence. So we have to be careful in this narrative that says that we are somehow erasing history by removing toxic symbols, because I'm pretty sure that taking the swastika off the streets of the UK did not erase the history of Nazism. I think we have to be mindful about that. So we recognize that there are times when there are ideas that are so abhorrent that actually to leave them up dehumanizes a community. And the moral thing to do, the ethical thing to do, is actually to remove them and place them in context in a vault, in a dungeon, in a dustbin, in a 321 dusty bin, whatever you want to call it, out of sight, and you can contextualize it there. And people who want to celebrate that nasty history, they can go into the dungeons and the basins and those galleries and whatever and read about that. But as long as books exist, as long as films exist, as long as poems exist, as long as humans are still creating material culture, we cannot erase history. In fact, I just made history a second ago by saying that I cannot erase history. We are always making history. The only thing we do not have permanent control over is the future. You know, I can predict the future and I can make it so by saying in a second or time to you, I'm going to say five, I said it, I made the future. We cannot erase that now. No one can ever tell me that by deleting Toyn's image from this video that I did not say 5. And we have to take that kind of approach when people use these childish arguments when it comes to removing statues from the public realm. And even if that childish argument is actually coming from the government, as in this particular case. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Brother Toy. I'm going to move on to Brother Kwame now, and I just wanted to put in a word here, because it kind of comes to mind around this thing around symbols and the impact of symbols. The naughty words that I shouldn't be using here, but I'm forced to use them. Epistemology and ontology. How is it that we're experiencing this world, and how do we impact on the world in a way that benefits us? So I've heard people speaking about that we need to be engaged politically with the change process, and the statues are significant symbols of experiences. What do we do with those symbols of experience? Brother Kwame, our political officer. I think you're frozen. I can see you.
Yes. Yes, can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. But intermittently. Right, it looks as though your internet is too, it's really a poor connection. We're getting bits and pieces.
Thank you. So as Brother Leroy of the history.
Brother Kwame, if you can hear me, perhaps switch your camera off. It sometimes helps with transmission.
His camera is off.
Kwame, if you switch your camera up, it may help with your reception.
Yes. Right. Okay. I've switched my camera off. So I'll make my presentation as quickly as possible, so that it doesn't interfere. So
It's really clear now. Thank you.
I'd like to thank. Yeah, I'd like to thank Sister Martha and Brother Toyin for the and the sister from I believe Namibia for their wonderful contributions. I would speak on the issue from the perspective of political philosophy and ideology. The question, who paid for the statues? I would answer it by saying it was paid for by feudalists, imperialists, and their systems, colonialism, and slavery. I mean, it is the imperialist system that pays or paid for the statues. Did they know that they were crimes? The answer is yes. They knew, because imperialism, to some extent, is a criminal activity. And you commit genocide, surely you know that you are committing genocide. It's a different question whether there is a law that holds you to account. So the answer is yes, they knew that they were committing a crime. But we can argue about whether there was a law that said it was a crime, which if it wasn't a crime, and so on. But I would like to put statutes into a philosophical perspective. So if you go back in history, there is a statue of a statue in Egypt called the Sphinx. So it's normally called the Great Sphinx of Giza. Now that is a statue, and it's an African statue, I suppose. We know the French tried to blow up the nose, and so on, but it is an African statue. Now, a lot of studies have been made about that statue, but from the philosophical perspective, we can say that some of the studies that have been done have confirmed that it is a work of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So we can say that philosophically, retrospectively, philosophically, the Great Sphinx of Giza is a work that assesses that, if you like, promotes humanity's capacity for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I think we all know that from the point of view of engineering, nobody has been able to say for a fact how our ancestors built that monument and similar monuments scientifically using engineering. So it is a monument, and that monument is not about slavery, it's not about colonialism, it's not about imperialism, it's not about feudalism. You know, it is the work. You know, it is aligned east to west. I mean, there's a lot of science, astronomy, and mathematics there, and that is a kind of, if you like, a monument that Africans, if you look at our history, tend to put up. Now, if you look at the relationship between philosophy and society, it is a view of consensus that the purpose of philosophy is to transform society. And I think many of us will already be aware of what Karl Marx, said. And Karl Marx said that, look, we have explained the world, philosophers have explained the world. The point is to change it. So Pan-Africanists are in the business of changing the world. We don't like the world as it is, so we want to change. So the relationship between philosophy and society is that, depending on what your philosophy is, you want a particular kind of society. So we must see monuments within the context of the philosophy of those who put it up. And there are two main world philosophies. They are idealism, which believes that society, or which believes that the world is constituted of spirits and ideas. And then there is the other extreme, the other view, which is materialism, which believes that the universe is caused by matter. We mean the elements like hydrogen, carbon, and so on. So those are the two views. And the African view, the African view, or our view in consensusism, is that we are on the side of the materialists, because we don't believe that you can just pray, and then you change the world. You have to act. So in other words, there's a relationship between thought and action. So the point I'm making here is that the capitalist state is an imagination. As you know, there's no such thing as Europe. Europe is an imagined thing. Because Europe technically is part of Asia. It's been cordoned off for Europe. So this whole thing is an exercise in thought and in imagination, in ideas, in spirits, and so on. So the point I'm making is that the monuments that we are talking about, the monuments that we are against, these are the monuments of enslavers, of thieves, of criminals, people who carved continents without consent and so on. These monuments are there to promote a particular philosophy, and so that is what they are. So when we want an alternative, when we want alternative monuments or statues, what we are saying is that we prescribe to a different philosophy. Now, on the question of philosophy and society, the whole point of imperialists is that these statutes maintain the imagination that they want maintained, and that is that they want the kind of society that they have currently set up to be maintained, and that's why they want these statutes to remain in the public sphere. Now let's move to society and ideology. Ideology, are these statutes meant to maintain? And the answer is very simple from the point of view of Pan-Africanism. The ideology that they want to maintain is one of a globally unequal society, where the black man and woman are at the bottom of some kind of social ladder, and then at the top are, if you like, Snow White Caucasians, whatever you want to call them, and then between them are different shades of Asians between them. And so that is the world system that these monuments are meant to maintain. And we are against that. Our ideology, as far as Africa is concerned anyway, is that we want the total liberation, the total unification, and the total development of Africa. So we want statues that, if you like, uphold those things. We want statues that uphold our unity. We want statues that uphold our liberation, that celebrates our liberation, that celebrates our unity. that celebrates our quest for the transformation of Africa. And so that is society and ideology. So that's what the monuments are there to do, to maintain that ideology, that it is okay, that the current, if you like, global social caste system is okay, and for us, it is not okay. So my fourth point then is, so our ideology is conscientism, and conscientism, its ideological principle is human equality, and the idea is that all humans, there's only one human race, and we all of us come from the same matter. We are all carbon, if you like, carbon, products of carbon. Nobody has yet been found to be anything other than that. So we are all from the same matter, and therefore we are all equal. You cannot examine any human being and see within their genes, if you like, slavery. Slavery is not in the genes. You can't find it there. It is a social, it is what we call the social valorization of human beings. So it is a position of consent to recognize there will be two forces. There will be two forces in society. There will be the positive political forces that want the statutes to be dealt with in some way, and I think that has been addressed by Toyin and by Sister Martha and the other sisters and the other sister. Maureen. Now, Sister Maureen, I believe. So they've dealt with that. Brother Abu.
Yes, Brother Kwame, Mr. Maureen.
Okay.
Thank you, brother. I think we were saying that you've
Right, thank you. So so Brother Tony, for instance, has told us that can I continue and finish, Brother Abu?
Yes, you can continue. I think it's your reception that was coming and going. Continue, brother.
How many minutes have I got? So anyway, so yeah, so consensusism takes a position that this statute thing is going to lead to, if you like, two competing or contesting political forces. There are going to be those who are for the maintenance of the statutes to remain where they are, and then there are those who are and those are the negative political forces. They want imperialism to maintain the world as it is, and then there are the positive political forces around the statutes who will say that, look, we need to remove them and put them somewhere. We need to, as Brother Tony was saying, we need to contribute to council meetings. We need to engage with our local authorities, and as our Namibian sister said, we need to replace the statutes and put them in some kind of historical space, and so on and so forth. And that's what our said. We just want them removed, and so on. So these voices are what positive political voices for the removal or for the dealing of the statutes. And those who want it maintained, like the racists and the government and so on, they are the negative political. So that is that. Now the last thing I would like, what the GAC then needs to do is to come up with a clear clear campaign program around what it decides it wants to do, and that must be set out clearly, and we must then pursue it and pursue it to the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brother Toye. I think this has been your first. Yes. Sorry, thank you, Brother Kwame. My apologies. This has been your first kind of public appearance as a political officer. Wow, this is quite something insofar as the position around recognizing the nature of what we're facing in symbols. And Kwame is very clearly saying that the symbols are the representation of a particular and a specific ideological positioning. in, I think, what Brother Soyin has explained as the retain and explain position of our UK government at the moment. And I think the other statutes that were toppled, the roads must fall campaign. I think it was linked up with the Trump must fall campaign. So there's clearly something about these being symbols of imperialism and colonialism, but we still have that challenge, and I don't think it's being answered. And we're moving on to maybe questions. I've seen a couple of hands up for some time now, but there's a question that I don't think has been answered, and it's that question of retention of the really evidence of the crime. So the crime has been committed against the Herrero family. How do we tackle that? It's a signal crime. And how do we tackle that insofar as this whole thing about knowledge? I know Brother Foy touched on it, but I'm going to go to questions on the floor. But I'd like it if that could be answered. I've got 3 hands up. I can see a finger, and I can see 3 hands. The hands were up earlier, so I've got Roy, then Sam, and then Cecil.
Yeah, good evening, comrades. Thanks for having me. You can hear me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
All right. Well, Kwame has spoken quite a lot. I covered quite some of the grounds. Just have to digress a little. And in relation to the question you're saying is on the ground at the moment, just suffice for me to say, for now, in relation to what I was saying in relation to the statutes, is the first thing that you see. It depicts white supremacy, and everything is so institutionalized. You see, one thing is the fact that if you look at it, these supremacists and the white that's what they call the council culture. All the processes and the ways in which they pillaged and they did all manner of things against our race, the black race and everything else, they wouldn't want us to reciprocate or do the same thing. Because what it is that all these statues you see about, these are thieves, robbers, and all the hoodlums and all the gangs and the leaders and all the stuff that went. I mean, for crying out loud, I mean, you tell me that Mongo Park discovered River Niger. What about the natives? In all these places, in Australia, in America, in Africa, there were natives there, but it is when, out of council culture, they impose themselves and they say they discovered it and this is when and how, and they destroy everything that they find in place. Okay, for example, in case in point, in Africa, they go to the place, they trick the people, destroyed and raped the women and took a lot of people as slaves, all being paying for it or whatever you. But at the end of the day, they took all the statues, trinkets, everything, all valuables, raped the whole place, and then took everything and they put them in the museums here in this country and all every other Western places. What we have to understand is this council culture, even comes to even Christianity, they were allegedly Christians. They had churches, but they were doing slavery. Where the white men go to worship was very close to where they put all the slaves and everything and that they put in the boats and then they carried out. And a lot of them died and everything. But what we have to appreciate and understand, just like the way the Jews are doing with the Holocaust and everything, and anti-Semitism and all that stuff, and the gays and lesbians are coming up with they're making so much noise. And that is what they're doing. They're imposing themselves. And that is what we collectively need to do. An exemplar and a glimpse of hope of that was an example by BLM. Black Lives Matter, and that is why there was that cohesiveness in America. In a case point, there was that cohesiveness where someone like supremacy is a council culture person, a person that maintains the status quo against the race, against the black race, was someone like Donald Trump, who came in because of Obama, and he clearly in our modern day was not canceling everything that the black man Obama did, even whether good or not. Tried to cancel everything, and then he made sure that the white extremists in America stood up, all the Q and M, all the QAnon, all the various white extremists, and he was never apologetic. He was very imposed. If you see this in relation to the statutes with the Black Lives Matter, in relation to the statutes, you see that he vocally was saying that nobody can touch it, nobody can touch the statutes. Anybody that does will go to prison for 10 years or more, and stuff like that for statutes. But if you look at it, BLM wasn't really fighting against statutes because there were many things better to fight with at that point in time. But what it is that it was at that point it was mere distraction, you know. But it's the psychology, is the philosophy behind it, is affecting our subconscious. Is that kind of image of superiority to make us feel that we Black people are nothing. A lot of these things that were invented were by Black people, and most of us don't even know that. You know, so a lot of these things that we did, you know, in the past and present, are always subjugated, and then they superimpose a white person over it. Maybe the white person now found the screw to tie the last boat, and they say, oh yeah, this white guy did it. You know, that was happening in music, you know, where you have the Black people not even being able to front their music, but you know, to make it sell. But what we're trying to say here really is that for these statues, like in UK, you have Donald Trump, similarly with Boris Johnson, similarly with Donald Trump, doing the same thing. The Tories about the statue, the likes of Farage even coming up now. What we are trying to realize is the fact that the monarchy and all these things are all part of the same thing. What we need to do as Black people is, for example, these statues, you know, we should take images, pictures of all these things, and we need to go down in history and explain a lot of these things, and let it be, you know, we make books and stuff and distribute them to a lot of Black people. Because, for example, when the Black Lives Matter thing was going on, you know, believe me honestly, like a lot of people, the youths, a lot of them galvanized, they all collaborated, they came together, and then for the human race, for humanity, you know, and then understanding the fairness, and then the unfairness of the past and the fairness of the future, and then we had a taste of what it can be, because in the past it was just the Black people fighting, our like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and all these people, you know. But we come to a time where even all hues, all races, because of the human race, they got involved, and then this sufficed. The one for this guy who led the Second World War. I'm trying to remember his name now.
I can remember it. Thank you, brother Roy. Thank you. I think you've made a very clear point about the whole point around the cancel culture and the philosophical position that holds that Black is bad and white is good, and replaces.
Yeah, the Bible, Jesus Christ is supposed to be Jesus Christ,
which is the point that I think
white and everything else.
Yeah,
the Bible, it wasn't like that. Jesus Christ was born in Bethlehem, and then they ran to Egypt, and they never heard of America, England, or any of these places where Jesus Christ was, or where and all that stuff. And obviously, the colors and the people there will be obviously black or brown. But the point is the fact that, so according to the council culture, these things were now imposed. They now impose their whiteness, their superiority on everything. And this is all a lie. And the history is all lies, what they do. And everything, the education is done, skewed towards them. And they just lie about a lot of, as if we did not do anything. The Greeks, the civilization.
I'm with you, brother Roy, but we need to make sure that everybody gets a chance to make a contribution. And your contribution has been very valuable. But I've got a few other hands up. I would like to catch up with them. I know Brother Sam's hands up, and I know Brother Sam, please try to limit your comments to about to a minute or so, if you can, brother. Thank you.
Right, sir. Thanks very much, sir. I want to dispute or disagree fundamentally with the previous speaker, Kwame. I think of the radio, the briefing. Because it is determined that when you are fighting or when you are trying, we are trying to relate to the history, not to abolish history. You understand? What we mean is to write history so that we can talk about the greatness of Europeans by exposing their own tragedies visited upon us. For instance, Great Britain was made by no less than 6 million dead, 60 million dead, to make Great Britain empire that it is today, for which people, if to now, because of the education they learn of the great empire, children, they come out completely trained as assassins, not as people comparative in nature. When they see a black person is already a monkey, a ruling person is already a slave, a black person, not human being at all, equal to their term, yet they talk about human rights. It is very, very difficult to talk about human rights when they behave directly like animals. And therefore, we must disabuse such ideas. Hypocrisy and pretense and chronic amnesia of the Caucasian is unacceptable anywhere in the world in which we talk about human rights. And therefore, I would like also to make sure that Mr. Kwame does not talk about human nature. Human nature is cooperative nature of people and society. It is not, it is life as it is, because human nature is films. Films made by individuals, not by society. Society does not choose to see a certain film. People selectively choose what they want to talk about. And in particular, it's mere violence, and in particular, articulate the violence on black people. You remember the first instance of films were fundamentally made by hanging people, both in Africa as well in the southern United States. So that these films have been made intentionally, historically, to undermine black race and make it a spectacle, so that even today, I don't know whose example I'm giving now, but even today, a person who becomes out or pointed out becomes a victim by parabolization through film and everything else. And some of the people, you should know better than what you think you know, because you believe, as you were, that you are made in the European image. That you lost your own the culture and language that are there, but it is something that we must try to reinstate that what has been lost in us, including the language as well as names and our culture and language.
Thank you, Brother Kwame. Brother Sam, my apologies. I'm moving in slow motion.
Okay, brother.
But thank you for that. So this whole thing about the interpretation of symbols seems to be on the table now, how we interpret these symbols, and this whole thing around idealism versus materialism seems to be on the table. So, Brother Cecil.
Thank you, my brother. There's been much high-level philosophizing, and I'm actually going to ask permission to go a little bit off message. It may be that I have a low level of consciousness, but I can't say that I've ever felt dehumanized by any statue or any road name. And it may just be that either I'm insufficiently conscious, or my consciousness of being seriously an African prevents me from being dehumanized by the racist representation of racist imperialism. And right, so that's my first point. The second point that I want to make is that I have a feeling that, and I respect the tightness of some of the arguments that I've heard tonight, but I just wonder to what extent it's true that we're actually expending intellectual and other energy on remarkably easy targets. Now, I know that Boris Johnson and them want to keep the statues in place, and so it looks like a real battle, to engage them, to get them down. But what are we ignoring when we choose to fight on that terrain rather than the other? So all of this stuff is about history, as if neocolonialism isn't still in place, as if Africa isn't being ripped off daily in the millions, and why the statues rather than the current media. A man just resigned from a television program in which they permitted him for years to do the most horrible racist stuff and to, be wonderfully popular in relation to it. We have a prime minister who's a notorious racist. We're not even addressing. We live in a place where we've just gone through and going through the Windrush moment. And we haven't bothered to organize properly, either in relation to individual compensation, which was screwed up and we allowed it to happen, and nothing about compensation from the state, which is the perpetrator of this stuff, for institutions that they're killing off, like these Black Culture Archive, which don't have no money. And I just wonder how it comes to be that we could be exhausting our intellectual and moral and philosophical effort on statues, right? when the current pattern of exploitation here and in the former colonies and the neo-colonies, where people who look like us run them in the interest of white power. And that's not the battle we're taking on. We're taking on statues. Isn't it a little bit extraordinary? Let me leave it there.
Thank you, Brother Cecil. So, in terms of this epistemological battle, this base of knowledge, these symbols, the relevance of these symbols to the current moment, and is it the best use of our times? I hear the question being asked. Is it the best use of our energy and time and thought to go after the statues rather than go after the oppressive force itself? So I think Brother Glenroy had his hand up. Before you got your chocolate biscuit. Your view.
Yeah, I didn't actually, but if there's no one else.
Well, Sister Nzinga's hand is up.
Her hand up.
Yeah, I'll let Sister Nzinga go.
Just to say, as you did call me, it's not my contribution, but just say to Cecil, we better be able to chew gum and walk at the same time. Okay? We better be able to do more than one of these things, because the oppressors are coming to us with all of these things. So it's not enough to say we shouldn't give the 3% to this and then the 8% to that. I agree, we have all these things to focus on, but we can do that.
Thank you. So you're saying the opportunity cost issue is about an apportionment of what we do. Sister Nzinga.
Well, I have to say, thank you all. I'm being spoiled. I've got the friends coming with flowers and other gifts. But anyway, that's an aside. I just want to, because I actually scribbled down a few points in relation to exactly what Cecil was saying. We're talking about statues when we need to look at the whole totality of the situation. We're in a commonwealth. Who is the wealth going to? It's certainly not us. We have a monarchy that were beneficiaries of the destruction of our people. And even the other day, I believe, when William was responding to the issues raised by his brother and his wife, we're told that they're not racist, yet the whole structure is built on the blood, sweat and tears of our ancestors and other people's ancestors. So for me, personally, I really am not going to get bent out of shape about statues. What I think is important is for us to focus on that fight for reparations, because a lot of damage has been done and needs to be fixed. Now, just this week, the students at Kent University organized a whole week of reclaiming the African identity, and it was brilliant. They had decolonizing the mind. They looked at mental health and how the history is damaging our people. We had African spirituality, Obia, Yoruba, Ife, a whole host, and that was the emphasis. Us taking charge of ourselves and trying to undo the damage, but also fighting for what is rightfully ours, which is reparations. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Nzinga. So there's something about how we respond. That seems to be where we are, how we respond to the statue. So I've got, I'm not sure if it's Roger and then Ebony.
Greetings, everybody. And thanks to the Secretary for inviting this wonderful meeting. I have had to dip in and dip. I've got the gist of the arguments and what's been said. I throw my lot in with very firmly with Elder Gut on this matter, because and the last sister who spoke. But I do think that whilst I do accept what Elder Glenroy is saying, able to chew and walk at the same time, chew gum and walk at the same time, it still comes down to priorities in terms of focus. And in terms of our priority list, fighting over and talking, even wasting any time on British statues on British soil, has surely very low down our priority list. I mean, immediately we've had, as other speakers have said, we've had this couple of weeks now, the issue of the royal family, the Commonwealth, things like completely taking out and putting pressure on our brothers and sisters in the Commonwealth, especially the Caribbean, to completely reject. This is our moment now for them to completely the Commonwealth. This is the time to exit on this premise alone, you know, and those are the kind of things into symbolism, because even that is somewhat symbolism, but that's the kind of symbolism we need to do. Symbolism about what we're going to do, about what we can do when we are united, not symbolism about their old bits of stone, and that's on their land where they are a majority. That doesn't seem right. We need to focus, and we need to stop allowing ourselves collectively to kind of switch our priorities and lose our focus. So that's what I would say to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you. So something about what we do with the symbolism in this special moment that we have, a window of opportunity, and I think everybody's agreed there's a window of opportunity. What do we do with this window of opportunity with these symbols? Mr. Ebony, is there somebody else who stands up?
Justin after, and then Sister Maureen. I don't know if she's applauding or putting her hand up, but Justin and then Sister Maureen if she had her hand up. Ebony, yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat anything that anyone said. I pretty much agree with, the notion that we need to organize ourselves, leading up to reparation. I think that, the time has stopped now for talking, and the time now has stopped for just marching. I think now is the time for some kind of action, and I don't mean violent action. And I'm not quite sure what that looks like right now, other than, being physical, which which I'm not condoning, which I'm not encouraging. But I think, when we talk about statues, fair enough, a lot of us didn't know about the statues beforehand, but it's about more than statues. It's about a wide range of things. It's about the history. It's about how it's affecting us today. It's about how it's playing out in modern society. And we all know, we can snivel out racists. We know what they're like. We know how covert they can be. We know that they try to, although when they're being racist, they're trying not to, or they're pretending not to be racist. So we know the full range of what's going on, and we know exactly the type of behavior that we expect. But, with regards to, reparations, I think that it's now time that we actually got what we deserved. And this whole thing about Commonwealth, there's nothing common about it at all. If you think about countries that were ruled by Britain, where are they now? They're poor, they're broke, and they've received absolutely nothing from Britain since they've had their independence. So I do agree that, we need to be focused, and we need to focus on getting what we deserve.
Thank you, Sister Ebony. So we've had a range of questions. Was there somebody else's hand up? Because I saw Maureen.
Justin and then Maureen.
Who was that? Sorry?
Justin.
Oh,
got his
Justin.
hand up now. Yeah.
I can't. Oh, yes, Justin. Yes, Justin.
Hi. Good evening, sir. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to just throw something in as well, something very minute. But I just want to agree with the gentleman, Mr. Cecil from Godsmore. I think the black race is really in danger in so many fronts. In our very lifetime now, there's a new scramble for Africa, both from the east and from the west. The post-COVID reality of the new world is also another challenge, because Africa is going to be much more poorer. The world is more poorer. Most of the economies are now going to literally start afresh, or they're going to be knocked down severely by COVID. And so there is a huge scramble for Africa. And again, when we look at governance in Africa, it's as pitiful as we all know. Nothing is being done on the African turf to really embrace the ideas of our Pan-African pioneers and leaders to integrate the continent. And this is what will save us. Unless Africa unites and become a continent that can actually pool together its resources for the common good of Africa and Africans abroad, nothing really is going to change. So I think Pan-Africanism is actually dying, in my opinion, and it needs to be recreated or regenerated. And we really need to look at the realities of what is facing Africa today. I believe the African race, and particularly the blacks in Africa and in the diaspora, collectively needs to engage and get involved in programs that will help Africa develop. We need to pool our human resources and also harness and protect our minerals, because none of this is being done by any of our leaders. So really my belief is, and I agree with the gentleman and a couple of others who've said, our focus should be on how we could, as the lady just said a few minutes ago, how we can engage our former colonizers and oppressors to actually reparate, to help us, in the reparation program, and really get dividends from some of what has been done for us. We've seen recently there are campaigns to ask for our artifacts, which is all fine. But again, what state are we in as a continent and as a people at the moment? So in my view, really poor governance, a real need for reparation. The post-COVID era is another, and the huge scramble for Africa that we're seeing at the moment. In the West Indies now, we've seen several countries being taken over, or on the verge of being taken over by the Chinese. It's also happening in Africa. There's been governments that have defaulted their payments of late, and there's a real crisis of what's going to happen. The Chinese are coming in huge masses. At the moment, there are 70 million Chinese in Africa, and on a yearly basis, it's increasing probably by 10 to 20 to 30%. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So some more about the context that we're in, and I think I've got Sister Maureen, who's part of the panel. So I really wanted to give the panel a chance to reflect back. I can see Brother Glenroy's hands up. If that's the last hand from the floor, I can take that, or go return to our panel for our panel reflections on what they've heard.
I wouldn't mind saying something, because I think there's been a substantial amount of view, in my opinion, in the other direction, if that's the correct thing. And I certainly have not been swayed by any of that. I appreciate what Maureen is saying about the history and not to lose the history. But I always say this to when people say that. I've never seen a statue of Adolf Hitler. But we know about him. Everyone knows about him. Everyone knows the crime that he's committed. So how is it that we don't have any statue of him, but people are worried that we will lose the history if we got rid of the statue? You know, Maureen will tell you that even after independence, I think Independence Day, when I walked up the high street to the stadium, it was Glaser Strasse or whatever the devil the German name was, and it took a while before that was changed. But it was changed. You know, I a few years ago, I was trying to buy a ticket for somebody to go to Leningrad. But since the capitalists took over, they changed it to St. Petersburg. Not even the travel agents knew that the St. Petersburg was the new name for Leningrad. Or maybe they knew and they just refused to say it because those that control that is able to change it. They don't say, you know, we've got to keep this because this was a symbol of the defeat of Nazi Germany. They're quite happy to change it. And what was it? What was St. Petersburg? St. Petersburg was the old name that the Russian imperialists had for it. But they have no trouble about changing that back. We seemed afraid, and I haven't got the memo. I'm sorry, I must have missed it somewhere. I didn't get the memo that says that if we do one thing, we won't do another. Where does that come from? It's not a competition. It's not that we're going to give only a proportion of our time to dealing with the images that we have to see daily instead of reparation. How did that concept come up, that we can't do all of these things required? Because the enemy doesn't work to our timetable. Don't go to the enemy and say, by the way, don't load all these things. Just give us one task so that we can, you know, keep an eye on it and stay on track. Where does that come from? The reality is that we have to take on the challenge as they come, and indeed we should identify them before the enemy puts them on our table so we can deal with it. You know, so my position remains that this is only one aspect of all the things that we're doing. The images that we see on a daily basis, if we know about the history, and what Toyin said earlier on is very important. The act of having this discussion, of tearing down Colson, meant that we were able to have a discussion about what this is about. So it actually brings up the things that we're campaigning about, it puts it on the agenda, and I think the more of them we identify and bring down will include the conversation. Why are we taking it down? These people were enslavers and we're demanding our reparations back. But it is also important that we also indicate what is it and why it is that we're taking it down. Because if a group of enslavers got together and said, this is our chief enslaver, this is the top of our tree, we want a statue about it, then we're talking about all those other enslavers that put money together to have this statue. Because many times the people whose statue is, they're not the one paying for it. So I think it's an indication and a conversation piece about who is paying for these things and why. Because they want to remind us every day, to rub it in our face, these are who we are. And we say no. And I say no. And I believe that we can do all of that. And we shouldn't be going around saying, well, if we do this, then we're going to stop doing that. We don't stop breathing when we go out the door. We keep breathing. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to give the floor back to our panelists, Maureen.
Ezra's got his hand up. I don't know if you want to take it.
I was going to ask them permission to do it because Maureen had her hand up earlier. I didn't give her a chance to. Maureen, do you want to give Ezra the floor and then I'll come back to you? Is that okay?
Surely, I think we can speak to Ezra first.
Yeah, okay then.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, brother. I'm going to have to agree with Benro. I just feel that I know the feeling I get when I go to Antigua, for example, and I'm in Nelson's Dockyards, English Harbour, these places that are named after the people that colonized us in the place that we actually now inherited through slavery. Seeing these statues is a constant reminder to us to put us in our place, as far as I'm concerned. Now, I then have to explain this history to my children. My children will see it. So from generation to generation, they will see that these people, oppressors, are standing over them on these statues on these plinths all over the world. And you don't see statues of people that have created oppression or hatred towards other races, such as the Jews, or even the Roman statues. A lot of them are destroyed now. People have left them to rot. So why are we the only people that are allowing statues that, or any type of those type of things deserve to be in a museum? If it's in a museum, I'm all for that. But to be standing out there for everybody to see, standing over us when we live in these countries, and we paid for that through our ancestors, paid for those statues to go up. If you think about it, because those areas like Bristol, Liverpool, London, they're all ports that generated lots of wealth from our ancestors back. So to see that statue, it's like a medal, a celebration that yes, we've done this to you, and we're going to keep it. And I'm not for that, to be honest with you. You go back to when the Jews took over the land and made Israel their homeland. They didn't just fight on one front. They had top weaponry. They also started doing a lot of agriculture, and they started doing a lot of business to generate that area and make it what it is today. The point I'm making is we can't just fight in one direction. If we're just fighting one battle at a time, then we're easy opponent to take out the game. We've got multiple things, multiple fights going on in Africa, in the Caribbean. We lack unity across these diasporas, and we've got multiple fights. But it doesn't mean that we do one fight at a time, because everybody else is fighting multiple battles, and that's why they're a lot further than us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Brother Ezra. So we'll go back to our panelists. And I think the order will change, so Sister Maureen, and then Elder Martha, and then Brother Kwame, or whatever way you want to do it. So it'll be Maureen first. Thank you. And I've just reminded people of our original questions, which were who paid for the statues of the rapists and slavers around London. And I know not everybody went at the issue in the same way, which is really healthy. And did they know their crimes? However, we're at a point now as to the relevance, it feels, of challenging the statues and our focus in the current time. I think that seems to be where the dialogue is. But I'll leave it to the floor, to the panel, sorry. Maureen.
Yes, thank you very much. Abu, I think I have answered those two questions from my side, because I identified the origin was paid for it, and what value I attach to it, or how I look at it. I think we would appreciate that, yes, we had a diverse conversation, diverse views for the evening on the specific topic. It's healthy. We should understand that we are talking from different perspectives, and from where I'm sitting, I am a direct descendant. I've been displaced. I don't speak my mother tongue. I've experienced being displaced culturally as well as geographically, and having experienced that in an independent country, having reduced to a minority group because of this history, and how at times present history or most recent history overrides or yes, overrides over the general history, and for that specific reason, and I'm not having an academic debate on it. I'm talking about my personal experience and how I relate to the aspects. And I fully agree that we have different views in the diaspora, and thanks for having me. But I was just putting up a question. I just imagine how Britain would have been if we had a statute of Queen Charlotte that is said to have been an African descendant. In this latest debate, I don't know if that was generally known in the UK, but for us it was news, and I'm like, I think it would have had some impact if probably that information was displayed in the statute and it was known. I believe the question of identity and a sense of belonging, and probably even the whole issue of racism could probably have a different take. But thank you very much for having me.
Sister Maureen. Thank you very much. So, and I think, yes, the point that was made by the panelists was we're all coming at the questions in a way of bringing the clarity of our experiences. And I think what Maureen is saying is that there's a specific experience of being disenfranchised that needs to be tackled. And we need to look at that as a priority, that disenfranchisement is a priority issue, if I get you correctly, Sister Maureen, that we need to have ways of dealing with that. I don't know whether Sister Elder Martha or Brother Kwame wants to come in next insofar as where we've got to in terms of the debate.
I said, who do you want to come back?
I gave you the option, so now that you're on, if it could be you, Brother Kwame.
Right, okay. So I take the approach to this discussion as I do in our conference in this class. Participants.
I think you've got the same challenge of bandwidth. If you take your camera off, Brother Kwame. We can't hear you yet. I think you're
sorry, I just went. Yeah, my internet went off for a moment. Let me turn my video off so that there's no bandwidth. Okay. But Abu, can you hear me well now?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
So I was saying that I take the position I take towards this discussion is the same I take during our conference classes, which is that participants speak their mind. Let me start with what rather Cecil Gatsby said. He said that he doesn't feel dehumanized by statues, monuments to, and if I may broaden that, he doesn't feel dehumanized by monuments to racism. Well, I can understand what he's saying, and that's understandable. And if we generalize that, we can say that there are perhaps millions of Africans, millions of black people in Africa who do not feel dehumanized by statues in Europe. And then we can then follow that debate, and where does that lead? Then it leads to where leave the statues alone. So then Brother Cecil Glasgow's argument then becomes what I would call part of the negative forces, which is just leave the statues alone, maintain them. But the ideological and philosophical argument is that these statues are not just statues. I mean, these are symbols, and these symbols have ideological and philosophical aims. And those aims are at variance with what we Pan-Africans stand for. And we Pan-Africans stand for justice, equality, liberty, and these statutes do not represent that. So, although we say it's not a serious argument, because we all agree during slavery there were people who didn't feel they were slaves. But not feeling you are a slave is not the same as you not being a slave or you not being a dehumanized person. So these statutes, in that sense, do dehumanize. So I therefore are on the side of Brother Toyin's argument, which he made before, which is that we must make the argument about the fact that the statutes dehumanize us, and that is a real argument, and that is it. Now, on a broader point, if I may say so, ideology has different tools. You know, different tools are, if you like, ideology has many instruments. And so, for instance, education, politics, local government, and so on, these different institutions, these are all instruments of ideology. You see, and the institution of having statutes is also an instrument of ideology. So one can't just argue and say, well, let's just deal with one instrument of ideology and leave the others. Or if we have a discussion, and that discussion is dealing with a particular instrument of ideology, then we say, well, why aren't we talking about another instrument of ideology? Well, we can't talk about everything at the same time. We can talk about one thing, at a time. What should we be doing? Look, different people can do different things. It's division of labor. And as someone said, you can work and chew gum at the same time. There are millions of Africans. The problem we have now is that the task is not fairly distributed amongst us. More of us need to do more. And some people are not doing enough. Some people are not doing anything at all. So I will end by saying that the tasks that we need to carry out in order to defeat imperialism once and for all is huge. And so it has to be shared, and different people do different things. So if you don't feel like working to bring statues down, fine. You find something else that you think you can do. Maybe you're a good speaker, so go and speak for us on a topic that you are comfortable with. Or if you're an educator and you don't feel that you want to work on bringing down statues, fine. Why don't you go and educate our children? So I'm saying that the tasks are many, the work is huge, and if you don't feel that one part is something you want to work on, don't tell others not to do it. Just do what you are comfortable with. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Kwame. I took the liberty of sharing a point that was made by Elder Martha about the accountability of local statutory organizations to do no harm. And that seems to be a central point here around the statutes, whether these statutes cause harm or not. And I feel that the greater sense of the feeling is that they do harm. And then the issue is, so I'm going to pass on to Elder Martha to kind of give us some feedback on what you feel from the discussion, what you've observed from the discussion. You're still muted, Elder.
Yeah, it's better now, yes?
Yes, it is, yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Chair. Yes, in the beginning, I said that I have no answer. I might have an answer later. So I might have to disappoint you to say, yes, we paid for the statute. And also to say that the statutes that we want to be removed did harm. They did harm because those people who were put up and celebrated were harm doers. And in the process of our work on reparation, which actually has the opportunity now and moving forward after this virus, where we have all agreed that is not business as usual. And in terms of taking account of all the harm that was done, either by stealing or by plundering or by stopping a whole development of all the nations, we need, and we're already doing that, but we need to push more to make sure that every village, every corner that our ancestors lived and we call our home is in a position to put down the price that they paid for these people to come and claim that they were civilizing us, and therefore they come home with their loots and they were put up as heroes. And we've lived with it for so long, we come now to the stage where we're saying, no, it's not right, we can't have it. And the only reason why it took so long is because the history, when you say history, the history is always told by those who conquered. The people who are conquered are not the ones who tell the stories. So when they come back and say, we've got rid of all these people, we've got so much gold and so on, and so much diamond, and we've got so much space, timber, and free labor, and so on, they were celebrated. So yes, the answer is that it's part of the things that we put as a package. But having said that, we have to be mindful that we're dealing with a system that is not very forgiving. I, as a person, I'm very conscious that some of the things that I've been involved in, including the Black Boy Poll, if politically those people who are for it are able to come back in power, they will see people like me as evil people who killed their joy of going to a pub where they had fun, where all these, Black boys were hanging around in grass skirts and so on and so forth. So they weren't given. We fought for each and every one of them, so we have to keep an eye on the ball to make sure that it doesn't, come back to where it was before and worse. I know there were points that were made which we can deal with, but specifically, we are agreeing that as a movement, when something is happening, like it is happening now, we have to take them and, individually and articulate And that's exactly what we're doing. It doesn't mean that we're not doing other things. We're doing quite a lot of things. And the fear is that because there's so many things to be done, if we're not careful, it's going to drive us really mad. And we don't want that to happen. So I'm going to stop, but before I do that, there was a point that I just needed to make around the issue of doing harm. Because I think that we have to take it very, very seriously, that when harm is done, you don't pay for it. You just have to make sure that you stop it. And if you see it and you don't stop it, then they will do more harm. And we don't want that to continue to happen for the future generation. So I stop there, and thank you all for this exciting meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elder Martha. Thank you, Sister Maureen, and thank you, Brother Kwame. Thank you, all of the participants in this. The debate's gone much wider than I expected to go. I thought it would be quite a straightforward debate, and it's extended far more. It shows how extensive the African genius is. Is it possible, just in closing, that people kind of show a thumb to say, electronically or otherwise, to say whether the statues or pushing down the statues is an important activity?
Before we take the indicative vote, Chair, I just wondered we could welcome Sister Tamara's. I think we do need to say something about this series of meeting in regard to the 21 days. So I don't know if you want to say something before you get the thumbs up or thumbs down. I see Cecil's got his thumb. Oh, you're not waving yet. But yeah. Before you do that, I wonder if Sister Tamara.
Don't target me so badly.
I don't know if people realize, see the slight resemblance between me and Cecil. I just look younger than him. Anyway, Sister Tamaris is here. I don't know if she wished to say anything.
Greetings, Sister Tamaris. They're keeping you really busy for the 21 days. Did you want to say something?
No, greetings, brothers and sisters. Today I'm just listening. You guys, this beautiful second UK edition. Just greetings to everybody. Sorry, I couldn't arrive earlier. So just to say, beautiful, beautiful what we are doing. It's been amazing. See how UK is improving year by year, the 21 days campaign. So just greetings.
Thank you, thank you. So we're connecting seamlessly with our Brazilian family in the 21 days. So is it okay to close with a thumbs up or thumbs up? I think Sister Nzinga wanted to report on something. So yes, Sister Nzinga.
I wanted to make 2 points. Is there a time when we're going to look at how we can support the Global Africa Plan and also the young brother, Adissa, and the An Essential Farm proposals?
Yes, thank you for that, because I feel as though we, as GHC UK, I mean, this is an open meeting, but I think as GHC UK, I would like it if we tackled that again.
Well, can I answer that? Because our guest speaker at the meeting for the members meeting, the 27th, 2 weeks from now, the guest speaker will be the author of the Rapid Action Plan. So we'll hopefully get some more time to ask him. And for those who are not aware of it, this is a plan and a project put forward about how to expedite the economic progress of the African continent. It requires a little bit more interrogation, I think. But listen, I know you want to do this thumb up, and I certainly want to get my thumb up. I don't know if you want to do that first, and then I would like to say something about the 21 days. I think if we said you wanted to finish by past, that might be a good idea. But yeah, let's do your indicative.
Okay, let's do the thumbs up, and then I'll let you give a summary around the 21 days. And this thumbs up will close this part of the meeting as far as our primary question. So the question is tackling these statues something that we should deal with, these symbols? Is it something that we should be tackling? So the thumbs up is that the thumbs up means we should be tackling it. Can I put my thumb up as well? Am I supposed to stay in the chair?
I'm sure you can put your thumb up.
I can, thank you. For now, it up. But it looks like I'm seeing lots of thumbs.
Can I say that I think we should just build mini-sized statues of the same statues and put them in a massive museum, but only make them about that tall. That's the alternative strategy, and make a sort of art somewhere you can visit.
So that's something that Maureen might be able to use as a tactic. I think we've got a majority of thumbs up. I was hoping the secretary would count them, or somebody else would count them. But it looks like a majority of thumbs.
Well, I ask for thumbs down, and then we can see what the...
With the thumbs down, I can see one thumbs down. Sister fingers not frightened. Sister fingers not free.
I'm abstaining.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah,
we actually, why don't we use the raised hand in the participants? It'll be easier to count.
Why are we counting?
Yeah, why are we counting?
Younger.
No, we don't really. I think there's a majority that are saying it's a significant issue. The debate is really said that the majority of people see it as a significant issue to tackle. I think that's what consensus is.
I think the abstention habit anyway. Yes, should I do that now, Chair?
Yeah, so I'm now out of the chair and you're
well, I'm not, but I think we said past, so we can use a portion of this time. As Sister Tamaris has said, the UK Global African Congress, my own trade union, the RMP's Black Solidarity Committee, and Africans in Brazil, the Coalition of Africans in Brazil, have been working together for quite some time before the 21 days. And if you can imagine, in the old days, we didn't have Zoom. Zoom may have been around, but we were not accessing that, because why did we need it? But we did have this archaic system of using WhatsApp. And you can have 7 people now on WhatsApp, but you used to only have 4. So whenever there were 5 of us trying to coordinate this activity around solidarity with Brazil and the 21 day, either Abu or myself had to get off so somebody else could get on. And that was literally the things that were going on. This year, obviously, with the pandemic, with the Zoom, it's probably a little bit better. But what this is about is, rather than have one day, which the UN has designated the 21st of March as the International Day for Elimination of Racial Discrimination, the comrades in Brazil say, let's have 21 days from the 1st of March to the 21st. And we thought it was an excellent idea. And so we supported it last year when we were having physical meetings. But of course, by I think about the 13th of March, around that time, it all went to pot. Lockdown was occurring, and the meetings, physical meetings we had to be cancelled. And then we started building on Zoom, and we started the Sunday International, which we are still having, and indeed tomorrow will be Mariella's Day. And for those who don't know Mariella is an African sister in Brazil who was very active in the favelas in empowering African people there. Indeed, was part of the 21 days activity. And she was murdered by the state during that 21 days on the 14th of March. And so every year, comrades in Brazil have been commemorating her contribution to the struggle and remembering her. She is currently, I think, maybe Tameas can fill up, but she will be addressing, I think, the UN tomorrow. So it's not clear whether we are able to speak to her, not Mariella, but her sister and her younger sister. So what we're doing tomorrow to mark that day is we are holding the normal standard Zoom meeting of the Sunday Solidarity. And what we will do is we will be talking about Mariella, we'll be talking about the political violence that goes on within some of these structures. And at the moment, the increase in political participation of Africans in Brazil, which is an ultra-right-wing government currently in place, has meant that those people are being threatened almost on a daily basis. One young lady has had a bullet sent to her in the post. So it's an horrendous situation. And the global community, I don't think, have risen up and recognized what happened to Mariella was so wrong. You know, I don't want to make comparison, but what happened in the response to George Floyd was also, I think, necessary in this particular case. But again, it depends how these things are treated. Because I remember Rodney King, there was a video, it was known, everyone saw it, and yet the police officer get away with it. And let me take the opportunity to say this. There is a message being sent by $27 million being awarded in advance of a court case. And why now, when they're picking the jury?
They know what they're doing.
Yeah, they're trying to undermine the whole court case, right? And I honestly say we will be lucky to get a conviction for 3 people. We'll be lucky to get 1, maybe even. You know, because now the whole emphasis of the jury and the jury selection is being shifted. So these things are being done deliberately. The danger of political activity is, and you can't say it's restricted to South America and other places like that. We had a young lady here, Jo Cox, who was murdered because of her views around Brexit, I believe. So the political arena that we all want representation in carries a large proportion of danger. And I think tomorrow we need to have a discussion around that. Some of the other things that are coming up, many people are not aware of this, but minicab or private hire drivers are being assaulted severely, and it's resulted in the death of 1. And on the 17th, forgive me, I haven't got the agenda here, the 17th, we are again holding a meeting to address that issue. Members from their union, the IGWB and RMT, will be working together to see if we can't get something together to actually address that. Rotimi is on the meeting. He was one of our speakers last year. He's an RMT member and a GAC member, and he's regional council, I think on the 15th, will be holding a meeting where Jackie McKenzie will be speaking in the series of the 21 days. The 18th of this month, we, within the RMT's Black Solidarity Committee, will also be holding a meeting where we've asked Pedro from Brazil and Roger McKenzie from the UK, who's the Assistant General Secretary of Unison, to speak on that day. And the theme will be, surely during COVID, you know, because we've got that focus on your mind, whether you agree with it, whether you agree with vaccine or whatever, surely at this time, the racism at the workplace has lessened, hasn't it? You know, so we want to have that discussion because you and I know that part of the reason why Africans are dying, Asian people are dying, is because they've got a crappy job and they're in the front line. They're not allowed to, they were not allowed or given the opportunity to be a manager in the post in the bus company. So as a result, they're out on the buses, and the buses within our industry of the transport has taken a big hit, and it's largely been those so-called black and ethnic staff who are at the forefront of it. I think the 19th at the moment is free, but we know there's a TUC Black Workers Conference going on, and I think we should try and get something there, but that's in the planning stage. And the 20th, the what is it, Ebony? The Haringey Stand Up Against Racism is planning an event. Where is it? Sorry. A Stand Up to Racism. An event at the moment, but we've not heard what other plans there are in regard to Zoom and whether there'll be opportunity for that. And on the 21st, which would have been the day that we marched, it would have been the day that we did something physical. Obviously, we are constrained with the restriction and whatever we will have on that day, but we will be doing an analysis of the 21 day this year. How effective has it been? What opportunity have they been to address racism in International Day of Elimination of Racism? And we mustn't forget, this day was selected because of the murder of 69 people and the injury of about over 100 people being shot in the back by the state in South Africa. It is a day of remembrance about Sharpeville, not just a day about elimination of racial discrimination. We must never forget Sharpeville. If any progress, and I have my own views politically about it, but if there's been any progress on the ground in South Africa, these 69 deaths, blood on the street, have contributed to that. So I'll leave it there, Chair. I'll answer any questions, and thank you for putting up the schedule of what's coming up. But that's it, and we're forever thankful to our Brazilian comrades who came up with this idea, because when we heard it, it just seemed so natural and correct. And we hope next year more people will be doing it, more countries around the world will be doing it. We want everyone to join in. It's not about 21, it's not about one day, it's not about 21 days, because we fight racism every day. Thanks, Chair. Ebony's got her hand up.
Yeah, just to let people know, on the 20th, which is next Saturday, it is the the United Nations Anti-Racism Day, which will be taking place in Brixton. I mean, there'll be various places around the world, as it is the United Nations. It's an international event. But as far as London goes, it will start from Windrush Square, and it will probably be in and around the Brixton area. I think there will be people coming from different parts of South London. So yeah, that's the United Nations Anti-Racism Day, which is next Saturday, and that starts at 12:30.
It's not actually that day every day. It's a Sunday. It's a Saturday, so people pick the nearest Saturday. They're always doing that because we would have the march on the nearest Saturday. But the official date is the 21st because it's about the murder in Sharpeville. But yeah, people will do the nearest Saturday because we get more people going out on that day.
Thank you for that, Sister Ebony, and thank you, Brother Glenroy. I can see Sister Nzinga's hand up, but before I forget, we've been asked for an image of the, I guess if there's anybody who lives near Windrush Square, could they possibly get an image of the
monument?
Yeah.
Yeah.
With possibly some Africans around it and forward it to Glenroy. But on ground.
Yeah. I've got one with me and Tamara's when she was last in the UK. I'm sure I can find it and send it out. And then there was one where Mel, Sister Nzinga, I think you were there, weren't you, last year?
I may have some from that event that Auntie Linda way.
Yeah, so there's loads around. We can find them. Who needs them, Abel?
Sister Tamari has asked for it as part of their publicity. So they
she should have her own.
It'd be nice if there's a contemporary one that could be done, because things have changed a lot.
All right, Jona's got her hand up.
A couple of years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, I've only got footage or an image from the march on August 1st, but I've got footage of it if you want it.
That might be useful. I think the march is a good. It's a good open.
Yeah, preparation march. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be brilliant.
I think I just said let's
still in it. So.
Yeah, let's send as many as we can.
Absolutely. All I wanted to say was how much I appreciated the translation at the meeting where the Brazilian brothers and sisters were presenting. I really
wanted. Why should we march? Why march? The title was Why We March. Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, it was just so amazing to be able to hear what was said and just press a button. Brilliant.
Yes. Yes. I think we need to be moving into the new era. As Brother Kwame has said, science and technology is critical. And we need to engage with it. We're into, this is one of the opportunities of this new era.
I'm just taking a picture of the screen. I hope nobody minds. Okay.
As long as my picture looks good, I don't mind.
We don't have on the makeup. What kind of
Will you lot behave? I think I got one. There's 2 pages, so I have to go to the next page as well.
So we've made it on time today. Unless anybody else has any questions, I'd just like to thank everybody.
Yeah, Colin is no longer here, Chair, and I'm sure he won't mind me talking about it. Sister Tamira is unmuted, so I don't know if she wants to say something. But I don't know if people are aware of what happened to Toyin. I'm not sure if I think Carol's probably gone already. Carol, as many people may know, is our chair of the RMT's Black Solidarity Committee. She's a proud member of the Jewish community who's been fighting against Zionism. And what happened with Toyin, for those people who don't know, and please look into it.
I'm going to share it on screen now.
Okay, but in essence, they're saying that he resigned, but he was driven out, and our mayoral candidate, what is his name, Sean Bailey, reported to the Jewish Chronicle or Jewish Structure that Toyin had endorsed Martin, beg your pardon, sorry, forgetting the name, but the author.
Professor the secret history of Jews and Blacks.
Well, it wasn't even that.
It was Professor Tony Martin.
Yes, but
when he was invited by the mayor to speak, and then he disinvited him.
Yeah, but that's not what Sean Bailey was reporting to the Jewish Chronicle. What he was reporting was that Toyin had said that Tony Martin was a well-respected professor, etc., etc. He was supported. He was making a statement about Tony Martin's contribution to literature, history, and so on. And as a result of saying that, Sean Bailey tries to tell the Jewish community that this made him an anti-Semitic.
Look, he needs a beating without good Jesus.
Has anybody actually listened to Sean Bailey?
Let's not. Well, yes, the Jewish Chronicle does.
Because I agree with Nzinga. He needs a beating.
No, I have to, as secretary, disassociating this platform for any suggestion of violence. You young lady who's getting your birthday, is it Wednesday?
Wednesday.
I probably have to redraw your card, you know.
Me?
Yeah, suggesting
My
things like
birthday's
that.
Monday.
Is it? All right, we're going to redraw your card, your birthday card.
Oh, okay.
It's
I actually meant the verbal meeting, not a physical one.
Oh, okay, all right, okay. There you go. Everybody to the rescue, as it goes.
Oh, I've received plenty this evening.
It's a verbal one. Our elder is going to be how much? How many on the 15th?
Oh, 7-0.
Yeah, beautiful.
Wow.
Woo! Well done, well done.
Thank you.
I hope I look as good as you when I'm 70. Yeah. So in essence, the story that you will find out there is a suggestion that Toyin had resigned, but the reality is he was hounded out of his job, and it's the continuation of the same unsustainable allegation as they usually do around anti-Semitic, and what our Black Solidarity Committee has done, we've written a letter. We now have the support of the Global African Congress, is that we know Toyin to be an anti-racist activist, somebody who has been our tutor at the RMT school around the issue of reparation, and he's somebody who we know stands with us in the struggle. So we will be asking our General Secretary to send that out, and the GAC will be sending that out in our own rights as a position on that. Because what's happening is people are being picked off, and some of the times we don't even hear about it. And when we do, it's much too late for anything to happen. I don't know. Toyin said he doesn't want to do anything until after May, because obviously the intention is to try and have a go at Sadiq Khan. Well, Sadiq Khan should stand up and say something, you know. But
maybe they need him gone as well.
I have to. We might get Sean Bailey instead.
Not if we give him a beating.
So, Cameron, I don't know what you want to do, Chair. That's
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I think Sister Tamaris is speaking at an event tomorrow, as well as Brother Kwame Gonza, who's the African Rapid Affairs Plan. And it's a part 2 of an event that the NOI are doing tomorrow afternoon. I was looking for the flyer, but I can't find it.
Yeah, it's 12 o'clock. I'll try and share it on the normal sharing. And there's a comrade from Jamaica. Well, actually, no, he's a Jamaican living in Panama. We were trying to get Lynn from Canada also to be on there. What the discussion is about, you know, a new political initiative. Do people feel ready to engage in having a different political party? They did last week, I think, with people in the UK and Europe, and this time they're doing international guests if they can. What are their views on that? So a few people will be there. I'll certainly be trying to log in if I wake up in time.
So thank you all. Thank you. It's been a great meeting. Have a great evening until we meet again.
Right. Good night, everybody.
Night.
And apologies for tomorrow's meeting. I'm actually going to be attending the launching of Mami Water, African Spirituality. That's Sister Michelle Yasampiwa.
Yes, I saw something. While I'm here, Elder, sorry, I'll do it public. Have you heard from Elder Lindaway lately?
I spoke to her about 3 weeks ago. Her daughter had died.
Yeah, in South
and
Africa.
she was organising a funeral, but obviously she wasn't able to invite us. But she's back at her address in Archon. And I mean, to be honest, she sounded quite strong. despite obviously the stress of having lost her daughter.
It's very sad because I think some years ago she lost her son. And
She did. I went to that funeral. Yes.
So okay, I hope somebody's staying in contact with her.
Sister Njeri keeps a close eye on her.
Okay, good.
Bye, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Happier, strong for Monday.
Thank you all.
Strong for Monday.